No cups, no ice, no guest service. Kind of sounds like a country song, doesn't it? But no, that's the guest experience at Kings Island this summer. Hello, everyone. Alongside Ryan Sir, I'm Don Helbig, and this is Tower Topics.
Tower Topics is a podcast by Kings Island fans for Kings Island fans because that's who we are and that's who we care about. Hey, let's kick this off by thanking our prestige members. Miss Mandy, 1983, Lil Mac, 21, Brian Hauser, 330T, Logan Lipper, Aaron Bort, Jacob Fix, Damon Barnes, Stephen Horneck, Eric Grau, Ian Crawford, Dustin Jackson, Songstress Miku, Dakota Cole, Lack Ray, Galaxy B-Boy, and Medic 302. Thank you guys so much for supporting Tower Topics at the highest level. That's the prestige level. If you want to be involved in Tower Topics, there's a link in the description. Members get early access to the videos, exclusive content, exclusive live streams, and some tiers can get some free stuff. So hit that link if you're interested.
But anyway, Ryan, back to the topic at hand. It's no cups, no ice, no guest service at Kings Island. Um, we've talked about that a lot since the park opened. We knew that the cost synergies were going to have some impact, and they certainly have. A lot of the cost cutting that's gone on, the staffing cuts, that's very noticeable. I know when guests ask, why isn't this open? Why isn't that open? They're being told staffing issues. It's only an issue because they choose not to staff it. They've had the people, in terms of staffing. People wanted hours. People were told they were going to get 35 to 40 hours. They're getting 12 to 15 hours. So it's a lot of that's going on. That's really causing a lot of problems at Kings Island this year for the guest experience. One of the things that you look to is some of the past leadership of Cedar Fair, Kings Island. They're even stepping up now, talking about it. It's just not you and I, Ryan, and Greg Scheid, the former general manager at Kings Island. He was a Cedar Fair executive too after moving on from the GM role. But on his LinkedIn, he expressed major concern. And this is quoting Greg. He says, "What will happen to the guest service and cleanliness standards that Cedar Fair once prided itself on?" He said, "Cedar Fair was once the gold standard in these areas, admired by other regional theme parks. Do we truly believe these standards will remain unaffected?" And, again, that's Greg Scheid, general manager at Kings Island from 2006 to late in the 2017 season, expressing his concerns of, what he's hearing, what he's seeing on social media. He knew that there would be dramatic impact. And Greg was a guy, he was a machine. The things that we've seen around the park, trash cans overflowing, out of ice, out of cups, tables a mess, that would not have flown when Greg was the general manager. I can guarantee you that. It was required. You were trained. It was ingrained in you. If you worked in the park in any capacity, and you were walking down the midway, and you saw cups on a table, or you saw, a piece of trash on the ground, you were to pick it up. You were to help clean the tables. Everybody, bought into this, and it wasn't just, well, that's Park Services job or anything like that. Everybody stepped up, and Kings Island did have that acknowledged reputation as one of the cleanest parks around. And sadly, this year, that reputation, I think, has taken a major hit, Ryan.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes down to it, this is further, even in like 2006, when, I guess it would have been 2006 when the buyout was coming, when Viacom was very clear that they were going to sell the park and they were cost cutting mode. I didn't see anything like this. Like, I remember some distinct things, and there are some levers that are better this time around than that time. For example, there was nothing in the international showplace. That's one of the things that stuck out to me. But there were people sending photos and posting them online and stuff. And this is just a sample of them. I think I had a total of like 18 of all these locations just closed. French Corner. This looks like the Mystic Timbers, photo booth. That's not a photo there. So I like I said, I've never seen anything like this. And then, we talked about
the new place to get blue ice cream. Somebody was complaining to me. They sent me a message saying they were in Soak City and they were wanting to get blue ice cream since it had been touted by the park that you can now get it out there. But no, the location was closed.
I know what first time you can ever get blue ice cream in Soak City, and they close the location. I don't know. Yeah. So the thing that really kind of shook me that I'd never really seen before is like the is it called Coaster Connections in the back of Action Zone? That was
Yep,
closed. I've never really seen that one
closed.
closed.
And then as we record today, a store on International Street uh, was closed. So it's just, every time you turn around, if one store opens, another one closes. It's like a store rotation or a restaurant rotation. Uh, the Pink Ben's Mess Hall, that's been closed more often than open. So it's just not a good look. And, the experience that guests have come to expect at Kings Island, they're just not getting that this year. No fault, really of the employees that are working there, all trying really hard. But when the mandate is to slash labor, cut this, cut that. It's going to happen like that, and it's going downhill fast. And once it starts going downhill, it's very hard to stop that train.
Yeah, it takes years to rebuild the trust and everything. And um, yeah, so I mean, we've seen cleanliness issues, stuff being open, and so on. Now we're going to get park apologists on social media and in the comments that say like, "Well, if the park wasn't busy, or whatever." So let's say hypothetically that the park wasn't busy for these string of days that we're hearing about this stuff. Okay, fine. First of all, even if it wasn't busy, this is an absurd amount of stuff to be closed. Second of all, any place that's closed can't be generating revenue. Third of all, if it does generate revenue, like the photo pass stuff, people have often prepaid for that, and now they're not getting what they paid for, or drink stands that people already paid for, and now they're not getting what they what they paid for, and it's creating like kind of a sad experience. I mean, it's nobody's going to go there and complain that Kings Island Collections, as you mentioned, is closed or anything like that. But if the park has a dead like look and feel, that's going to be an issue. When I visited Geauga Lake one time in 2006, I think it was right after the acquisition, and the one thing that I remember from it is that the park felt abandoned because
Yep.
not necessarily that there weren't people there were people there, but like all of their shops were closed. It was very reminiscent of this. So you'd walk down entire midways where the Dippin' Dots is closed, the ice cream's closed, the t-shirt store's closed, just everything. And that's the pull away. And if that's the look and feel that people are going to get from the park, that's going to take a while to recover from.
Yeah, and you'll hear it on their quarterly call. There'll be all kinds of reasons for why something maybe didn't hit the mark. It'll be we had unseasonably cool weather, we had rain, we had cicadas, whatever it might be. That doesn't have. I mean, you have rain every summer. You have it's either too hot, it's too cool. I mean, there's always something there. So you don't want to hear excuses. You just want to hear why has attendance really plummeted. Is it because you're not delivering the experience that guests have become accustomed to? We're in June now, so they've already had April and May to see. A lot of the pass holders have seen how it's gone, and maybe a lot of them aren't coming back, in June because of what they experienced in April and May. They just weren't happy with it. Just face the facts. That is contributing to the attendance downfall so far this summer.
Now, I didn't get to read Greg Scheid's post on LinkedIn. Is he simply posing the question, like, do you think that they'll uphold the standards, or is he suggesting that
He's
they're not?
questioning the motives of what they're trying to accomplish. That you had this reputation of cleanliness at all the Cedar Fair parks. That was one of the cornerstones. And so what his post was, if you're going to let go of all this leadership from the general manager positions, and other managers and that, and you're going to keep cutting, how can you expect that not to impact the guest experience? How can you expect that not to impact the cleanliness of the park? That's what he was alluding to. I think when I read his post, is that he's just asking the question. How can you do this and expect to maintain that? And you can't. It's being shown that you can't.
Yeah, I agree. And then, so there were a couple incidents.
Mm-hmm.
These are obviously cherry picked, but they're pretty egregious. Um, So there's one
And
on
these are
Tuesday at
ones
Sky.
that were specifically shared with me. Just hey, did you
Yeah,
hear this one? Did you see that one? And they're pointing out where people are talking about this. But go ahead.
yeah. So I guess Tuesday at Skyline, and I'm assuming this is Skyline and Coney Mall because the one in the water park hasn't been opened yet this season, from what I understand. Um, so it ran out of season-long paper cups and refused to provide guests with any other alternative, forcing guests to take their food to another place to get a drink. And they also, if you ordered a four-way, you would be informed later that they were out of onions too.
Yeah, a little too
So
late to change your order and stuff. They've already scanned you. But yeah, I mean that must be fun carrying your Skyline chili, whatever. Now trying to go to another location to try to get a drink. You know, it's little things like that that are becoming a big, big problem.
what's funny is I can't tell you how many times I've gone to get a drink and the person was just out of the season pass cups like for the moment, so they just gave me a normal size cup. Like I don't know if they're not supposed to do that or if they're cracking down on it or whatever, but they have done that in the past.
Yeah, and this
And
was early afternoon. It's not like it's dinner time rush or anything, and they run out. I mean, this is early afternoon when this one happened, and then another. I guess we'll call it a customer service fail that happened. This one goes to the brew house. A group comes in and they ordered and asked for salad instead of the tots. Okay, it seems like a simple request. So they ring it up. They honor that request at the register and all that. So they go to sit down and then the food, comes out. But instead of the salad, they get the tots. So, they complain about it. They show the receipt, where it clearly says, salad instead of the tots. The supervisor then comes out and said that they made the decision in the kitchen not to honor it since it would be an upcharge, and they didn't pay for that upcharge. So the decision was made in the kitchen. Well, that's a communication fail because the person at the register should have known they can't do that. Maybe explained it to the guest. Um, so you know, this guest, they said that's not their fault. That's what happened. They said they were not charged, and the receipt shows what they ordered, and they want what they ordered. The supervisor just said, that's tough. You're going to take the tots.
yeah, so the thing, in my opinion, if the cashier
Yeah.
missed it, that's between the manager and the cashier. Like the guest already won at that point. But I would say worst case scenario, and this would probably be bad customer service, is if the supervisor came out and said, "Hey, our cashier made a mistake. It's supposed to be an upcharge for the side salad. If you want that, you've got to go. You got to go up to the register and pay for it." And I would even go as far as saying they should walk them up there and make sure they don't have to wait in line or anything, since again, not their fault. But to come out and be like, "No, you're getting tots instead."
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, you'll take the
who are
tots.
these people? You will take the tots.
I know, but you never. I mean, that would during my 17 seasons there, if somebody had that kind of attitude, wherever they wouldn't have been there the next day. I mean, it's just amazing, and this is not an isolated story. We're hearing this in a lot of different, situations. And when you look around and you see the trash cans overflowing, you sit at a table and there's ketchup and mustard on the table, and napkins sitting all over the floor around you, and it's just a mess. It makes you wonder, since we're talking about somebody, a decision being made in the kitchen. What's it look like in the kitchen? How's that look when you look at what's happening inside the restaurants or outside the restaurants? That's just something that I think about now is okay. What's it look like in there where they're making my food? Just my thoughts.
Well, the Board of Health records are public, and now before anybody goes looking them up, I'm sure probably every time they inspect every restaurant, they find stuff. It's the nature of it. But
Right, it would be.
if it gets egregious, that's the question. And we may have to do an episode on that if there's something interesting in it. You never know. Now there is good news, Don.
What is
Reports are
it?
coming out. The reports are coming out that Coney Barbecue had all of the flavors of Coke in stock. Caveat
Really,
here:
really.
they,
So they were all in
did,
stock. That's rare.
they're all in even my luscious Coke Zero that I absolutely love. The but there's a big but here. They didn't have any carbonation, so they were all flat.
you
So do
know
you think? So do you
that
think
had the
that the
second best Coke Zero, by the way, in my opinion, in the park. The other one was French Corner. which you can only get when it's
For the
open.
fountain, you're absolutely right. You've got your tier correct. But I think that the best Coke Zero is out of the freestyle machines, personally. Usually the best Coke is out of the freestyle. But let me ask you this, Don. When we talk about no CO2, no cups, they don't have onions. Is that a product problem or is that a staffing problem? As in, do you think that they really just ran out of onions, or they didn't have somebody to cut the onions and or go to the warehouse to get onions?
I think it's a
What do you?
combination of both.
I think it might be.
I think it's a combination of both. It's just these are stories that we didn't hear in previous years. You can go back. I mean, we're talking. Of course, there wasn't social media and that back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s and that. But I mean, did you ever have a season that you can recall, Ryan, since you've been a Kings Island fan, where there's been so much negativity surrounding, things like we're out of cups, we're out of ice, the tables are a mess, the trash cans are overflowing. A lot of these, shops are closed. Have you ever been around or remember a year like this?
2006 is the most tantamount one, and I think that for the most part, this is like for the little stuff that adds up, which arguably matters the most. I think this is worse.
Right.
For the big stuff, like I mentioned, they didn't have a show in the show place. They had a retread of School of Rock in the theater, which was a good show, but so the level of entertainment as an
Yeah.
umbrella, not as
Well,
in
that
shows, was
year
down.
too, though, it was bare boned in a lot of ways to prepare for a sale.
Right.
Make it more attractive for sale. And then it slowly got, built back up. I remember my first, you know, full year, was 2008. I came in, early 2007, but 2008. What was new that year was we changed the name of five rides, and we had twice the number of trash cans. And that was exciting for the park, really, because the cleanliness, that mandate,
Mhm.
what Cedar Fair prided itself on, that cornerstone, that was going to be ingrained. And, everywhere you looked, not only were there trash cans, but there were people out there making sure that those trash cans, they kept changing the bags and that. So you weren't seeing trash in that, out in the midways, out on the floors in the restaurants. But it's not just been the food experience, Ryan. We're also seeing some attitude problems by associates at some of the rides. Uh, report that it's all that there was because the attendance has plummeted. Not many people there. A group of about 11 were getting ready to ride a ride that holds 32, and they get up to the top, and the ride associates saying row one, row two, row and they get to this point, and they say row four, and they're like, well, I want to sit toward the back. You're sitting in row four. Well, why? There's not enough to even fill the train. Why does it matter? I'm running the ride. If you want to ride, you'll sit in row four. Just attitude like that, totally unnecessary and not something that you would typically expect when you're, if you've been visiting Kings Island over the years, to have that kind of, hard nosed approach to something. Did it really matter if they set where they wanted when the train's going to be more than half empty? No, it doesn't. So I don't get things like that. And all you're doing when you do that is when it comes time to renew season pass, we keep saying a lot of people, always say they're not going to. I think this is the year when a lot of people that say that actually don't do it.
Well, again, I've always said this. In the months of August through April, it's please buy a silver pass. We really, really want you to buy. Silver pass, gold pass, prestige. Well, we hate you, prestige, but silver and gold pass. You're the foundation of what we do. It's so amazing to have you. We're going to offer you free fast lane to renew. And then as soon as like April's over, you're a burden on the park. And we've crossed over into that threshold of being a burden on the park. So I don't know who this person is, but whoever it is seen as a burden. And that's trickled down from the attitude of some members of management.
Do you think that the associates being a little snippy with guests this year, telling them you'll have the tots,
Mhm.
or you're going to sit where I tell you? Do you think some of that has to do with the fact that either there's not enough people in the leadership positions anymore monitoring what's going on, or do you think it's the fact that maybe they're making less, than they did last year because they cut back some of that a little bit too? That maybe they're upset about that. I mean, what do you think's playing into this? Because it's just something you don't expect.
There's a couple different things that I think, and as with I've posed this same question to you in different forms with other stuff in this episode, but I think that, it's a mixture, just like everything else. Like I know that some people took pay cuts. Some people that, well, I don't know if anybody in rides like took a pay cut. I know that people got hired in less. So if the person was new or whatever, then they're making less, so they probably care a little bit less. The oversight is definitely not there. But I also think that there's a possibility that either this person was promised 40 hours a week and they're getting 12, or they were promised 40 hours a week and they're being scheduled 65.
Yeah.
Either one. And I'm not making an excuse for them, because I think that, there's some sort of base level of service that you have to offer. And the base level here in America is typically just don't be rude. But uh, I think that some of it is a little bit of a trickle down of the attitude. Like, I think that this generation that's working is a little bit better than the one a few years ago. I've always, like, very famously on KIC talked about the people that think the microphone is playtime, and it's like, you're riding Mystic Timbers and they're like, enjoy the rest of your day at Grizzly at King's Dominion or something like that. And like, I always thought that was super unprofessional. But I had somebody come to me saying, "You're not going to believe what our managers are making us do." What? Like, they're not. They're like being totally hawk. Well, they're not. They didn't use the word hawkish, but they're watching us with the microphone. They said it's unprofessional to say a different ride. We're just trying to have fun, and it's like, I'm glad you have fun at work, but you have to do the basics of the job, and then worry about having fun. When
Yeah.
you come back, you say the wrong name of the ride, you say the wrong park or whatever, and especially like when they would say Six Flags something when it wasn't a Six Flags chain. That's not good. And
No,
you know,
most of the guests were not amused. They weren't
no,
entertained by that.
well, and also I remember, like, again, this has gotten better like in the past 2 years, but the mics were like turned up to 11, like Spinal Tap, and they would use that as an excuse to talk more than they needed to, and it would be like people were holding their ear. I remember distinctly in the in the Diamondback station, they they would say like, have fun going up, down, and all around Rivertown, which I think is cool. I'm fine with that. But the girl that was doing the spieling decided to say, have fun going up and down and up and down and up and down and up and down and up and down, while the whole train was going out, and these kids were holding their ears. It's like, is this kid getting a headache worth you having fun? Like,
Yeah.
having playtime on the microphone. So I think that there is a bit of an attitude thing. And some of that might be from lack of oversight, because we know that, there were some changes when it comes to management and stuff. But I feel like they probably wouldn't do that with a full timer there, or a competent supervisor there, like an area supervisor. So if those people just aren't around, they can do whatever they want.
Yeah.
You know.
I think for me, just enjoy your ride on Diamondback. That's sufficient.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. Enjoy your ride on Diamondback.
How was your
It.
ride? When you
I
come
don't
back
know.
in.
Yeah, you can do how was your ride if you want. I don't see the necessity of having the mics. Like, it seemed like they were having a problem with them. Like, this was like 5 years ago, where they took all of them away, and I was so elated. And I was like, they just had the drivers do the thing, because they've got that thing built in where they were like, come in, we'll grab your loose articles, just information only, because they had other stuff to worry about, because they were driving the
Hmm.
ride. They weren't some kid with like a Michael Jackson headset going up and down and up and down and up and down. And so, but of course they got him back, which was tragic. But yeah, without any oversight, they're going to do stuff like that, and they're going to tell you where to sit, and they're going to be rude, and you're dealing with kids. But I remember when you would market the employment opportunities. What was the phraseology you used? Like, gain skills that you could take with you through life in the workforce or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, you would learn. Yeah, you would learn. Important, skills that'll help you later on in life at your other jobs,
So
communication skills, things like that.
so imagine if you even worked at Wendy's and you started popping off through the drive-through. Like, I don't think you'd last long there. I'm shocked that
No,
it
you
lasted
wouldn't.
this long.
You wouldn't.
Uh,
All right, moving on.
anyway,
What else we got?
I don't even know what we're talking. Oh yeah, Kings Island. So we did we did an episode last week about the risk of these kind of things that we're talking about. So this is more of an update, but it was posted on KI Central, and we're talking about like this is what risks Kings Island becoming a second rate park. And somebody made an interesting comment. I'm going to read it verbatim. He said, I think it's safe to say that KI is well on its way to becoming an authentic Six Flags park. The cleanliness is through the cellar. Horrible this year. Mostly borderline putrid to gross. Six Flags needs to get a handle on this sooner than later because the guest experience this summer, more so than any Paramount's Kings Island season, is atrocious. I love that they are including the drink plan with the new pass purchase. Great. The drink dispensers all seem empty before this. Can't wait to see how difficult it will be for my family to find a drink station with a Coke now, let alone ice. The lights on International Street have a ton of burnt out bulbs, and a line of them on the south side are now unhooked and drooping. I'm willing to bet significant money that it will be still be drooping in August. Well, and not just not being able to find a drink and ice, but finding an open drink station is the experience that we've seen the past several days.
Now you did it, Ryan. We're going to have KI Central getting run on Reddit.
Yeah, that's fine. If you're
No, but I mean, this just it just supports everything that you and I have talked about when we see comments like that, and people, you know, most people know that this is happening and they accept it and they're disappointed by it. But there's always those few that the park apologists and that they want to just blast us for telling the truth and that. But that's our obligation. We've talked about that since day one of this podcast, that it's for the fans, by Kings Island fans, and we're not doing this podcast, for the park. So if we see things are starting to get better and that, we'll certainly acknowledge that as well. People are telling us that it's, dramatically improved now, that every time they're going, there's ice, there's cups, there's not trash all over the place. We'll talk about that too. So, we're as fair as it's going to be, when it comes to talking about Kings Island. It's fair, frank analysis, and hopefully that better days are ahead. I keep looking at 2028. That's still pretty far down the road, but I think it's going to be tough sledding until we get to that point. They've got to get through these rough patches, all those cost synergies that were promised, and it's unfortunately impacting the guest experience.
Yeah, and again, like you mentioned, it's kind of reflected in attendance. I feel like that it might be as a result of this, and it could be a little cicada, a little weather, but it would be one thing if it was 105 degrees every day, but we've been unseasonably cool, and I feel like that would draw people to the park because people associate the negative with Kings Island as it's hot and the drinks are expensive and it's crowded. But if it's cool out, for me, that would tempt me to go. But I don't know. The Savannah Bananas were in town over the weekend, so it could have been it.
There's always been something. There's either concerts, there's everything, and there's always Cincinnati's an entertainment city. Something always going on. So you can't buy those as excuses. There's a reason the attendance has plummeted, and I think they need to look, at the operation, experience the park for themselves as a guest, and they'll see why things are the way they are in terms of what the attendance is on a daily basis. They can do all these giveaways with tickets now that they're doing. You get free drinks with any ticket kind of purchase. You get free drinks if you buy a season pass at this point in the year, which has infuriated a number of people who purchased the all-season drink plan.
Yeah.
But you can do all those kind of things, and I think more deals are going to be coming because, it's not just at Kings Island, it's across the whole chain. Things are not going well. So when you do these kind of deals, that is a sure sign that things are not as expected, that they're falling behind on those projections and they're doing whatever they can to try to make it up.
And they appear to have ground to make up with 150 million in cost synergies on top of what appears to be plummeting attendance. We'll be right back with Tower Topics Tidbits. All right, kick us off.
All right, Tower Topics Tidbits. Tony Clark. A lot of Kings Island fans might recognize him from Cedar Point. He's been Cedar Point's longtime director of communications. He's now, according to an article in the Cleveland Plain Dealer, he's now also heading up public relations for Kings Island. Ryan, you and I thought that would be the case when they made some changes before Memorial Day weekend, like who would be overseeing Kings Island. It just made sense that Tony would would be that guy. I've worked with Tony. I think I think he's a good guy. I think he's great on camera. I think he does a great job in that kind of PR role. He's a good writer. He will address media concerns. You always see him responding back a lot of times to the basic questions and that. So I think that's going to be good for the Cincinnati media, Dayton. Anybody that covers Kings Island, I think it's good to have Tony in that role. Now I will say if one of the questions that I was asked was how would this impact coaster stock, because he has Coaster Mania at Cedar Point, and once he took over that event from Brian Edwards, who had left the company, there were changes from Coaster Mania. It went from a 2-day event to a 1-day event. It went from needing to be a Coaster Club member to anybody, and their brother could come to the event, first come, first serve on buying the tickets, which kind of made that more of a glorified season pass event. So with Coaster Stock, they're concerned that it's going to go to a 1-day event, that it's going to be anybody can come to the event. We're going to see the same things that happened there with Coaster Mania, but I wouldn't be worried about Coaster Stock right now. I'd be more focused on hoping that the day-to-day guest experience just improves in the park.
Yeah, Coaster Stock is like 11 months off at this point. I feel like there are bigger and better things to worry about.
Yeah, that's the last thing the company's going to worry about is events like that. I mean, they got bigger fish to fry. So it's the last call this weekend for the Food and Wine Festival. If you haven't experienced that yet, I recommend that you check it out. They made major strides from the first year with it. It's really good entertainment going on. Hearing good things about the variety of food that they have this year. And I'm not a wine drinker. I know you aren't either, Ryan. But it seems like the different samples and that you can get there, that's being well received as well by guests. So last chance to do that this weekend. And we have the opening of Trailblazers Extreme. It's presented by Bomb Pop. So it begins its run through August 3rd this weekend. Now, if you're not familiar with Bomb Pop, Ryan, it's a brand of ice pop with a distinctive rocket shape. It's known for its red, white, and blue colors and a combination of cherry lime and blue raspberry flavors. Bomb Pops was invented by James Merritt, whose ice cream business, Southern Ice Cream, would eventually become part of Wells Enterprises. So we thought we'd educate a little bit on this episode as to what was behind the sponsor.
I feel like we did a bit of a disservice because we did an episode about ads going everywhere and how they're like M&Ms and Snickers ads. We didn't talk about the history of those companies. I feel like there's an off-season episode in that because I like what you did here because I know what Bomb Pops were, but I didn't know the history of them.
Remember I think it was like 2 or 3 weeks ago, I sent you a message and I just said, coming soon to Kings Island, Bomb Pops as a sponsor. And here we are.
Yeah. So, okay, let's pause there because I do have some thoughts. So you and I made the argument about, ads being everywhere and how it can cheapen the experience and so on. I'm sure that Trailblazers Extreme was finalized, signed, sealed, delivered before Bomb Pops came on. But how would you feel if the option was put a sponsor on it or don't do it? Like if the sponsor's willing to pay for it, like where would you?
I don't mind the name of something, like the name of the show being sponsored by Bomb Pops or the fireworks by M&Ms. I don't mind that. I think where I would draw the line is if they start putting stickers on like the Beast train, like Snickers, all over the trains, or Diamondback, they put M&M stickers. Some of the other things that they've got on the antique, cars, they start putting the Progressive logo all over them and stuff. I would have a problem if they started to go to that degree, and we know that a lot of the legacy Six Flags parks have done that. So that's when I think it gets a little trashy, a little over the top. It kind of commercializes the experience a little bit too much. So I hope they don't get to that point. I don't mind if it's just ride presented by, or in front of the ride they have the name of it, like it would be the Beast, then underneath would be presented by Snickers. I don't mind that. I think they need the revenue in that, and I don't think that's too bad. You see, all the sports arenas, are now, they all have a sponsored name to them. You're seeing the advertising on the uniforms, on the sleeves, and that. You see the outfield signage has all kinds of advertising on it. So I don't mind a lot of that. It's just don't have it impact the experience, by just plastering the trains with all these different logos and that.
I hate to give it my blessing because I feel like the next step would be to put Snickers on the beast trains or whatever. But I think that is a good solution, because the reality is, I mean, 2026 is probably not going to be pretty either. But if you want to have, the Bubble Show presented by Tide and Trailblazers Extreme brought to you by Bomb Pop, like if that's what you need to do to put those
Yeah, I don't
shows in
mind
there.
that, and they've always had sponsors. I mean, I can remember when the fireworks were sponsored by Marathon. They had the air show was presented by Firestone. So I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they've always had those kind of things. It just don't make it look tacky. Now I think instead of putting stickers all over, say, the Beast Train, if they were to get to that point, uh, the ride crew, on your sleeve, your uniform sleeve, just have a Snickers logo or something on it. Just do it that way so it's more subtle and people still see it, but it's not ruining the charm of the rides. We'll say.
Absolutely. Hey, let's move on to a segment we like to call Buy or Sell. Don, buy or sell. Morale gets to a point where management purposely doesn't open stands or poor ride ops or poor ride operations to spite the company decision makers. So essentially, do you think that people on the park level will do things to scuttle the park because they get so disgruntled? Buy or
No, I
sell?
don't think we'll see that too much. I think that if it got really really bad, I think they would look for other jobs or something. I think they would be, if they intentionally did things, they wouldn't last too long there. So I don't see that being the case. I think more of it would be just they just decide to leave if it's not, not a good situation for them. They're not having fun. They're not getting the hours. I think they would do that more than, do something, like being suggested here. So I'm going to sell.
I am too, and simply because the people that would make a lot of these decisions don't have, uh, like, your regular ride ops and stuff. They don't have like a pony in the race in terms of, um, like regular operations, especially
Right.
like when we talk about food stands and stuff being open. That's made on a decision level that's much higher for somebody that actually has like a stake in all this.
Yeah, they're
Uh,
not going to close. They're not going to close, stands and rides and that to try to like fire back at upper management. That's not what's going to happen. And they can't do that. I mean, that would, they would be out if they were intentionally not opening things just to try to spite upper management. So no, I'm definitely selling on this one.
yeah. Okay. Let's move on to some theme park headline news. All right. So heading back to Holiday World, got an accompanying video here, but Holiday World and Splash and Safari have once again raised the bar on summertime family entertainment with the return of the acclaimed nighttime spectacular, Holidays in the Sky. Back for the 2025 season, running nightly June 21st through August 3rd, Holidays in the Sky will light up the sky above Santa Claus, Indiana for 44 straight evenings. This year's edition features 600 synchronized drones, several of which carry pyrotechnics, adding jaw-dropping bursts of light to the already mesmerizing aerial choreography. The show is included with park admission and begins each night at 8:50 p.m., weather permitting. You can get the full story on themeparksbydawn.com.
Yeah,
I have
Ryan,
not
this
seen
is
that.
yeah,
I
it's a
so want
fantastic
to see
show.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
fantastic show that I saw last year. I saw it I think 3 times. With it, they changed it up a little bit for the fall. It's I mean, the visuals are stunning. I you'd be hard pressed to find a better drone show in the entire industry than what Holiday World does. It's certainly worth the trip down. It's not that far from the greater Cincinnati area. If you're standing where the Eiffel Tower is, it's going to take you 3 hours to get to Holiday World. So I would definitely recommend that you go check it out. Holidays in the Sky. I think you'll find it to be one of the best shows that nighttime shows that you've seen in the entire industry. It's right up there with what you would see at Disney. So I can't wait to go see it. I know you're looking forward to seeing it, and this year, the exciting news that they've added pyro to the drones, so that's going to be a nice effect.
Yeah. So very exciting. So good for them. All right. We'll be right back with the listener questions. All right. Do you want me to read the listener questions, or are you feeling up to it?
You read the listener questions.
I've got it. First one, Dave from Northern Kentucky. David from Northern Kentucky. He said, I know you two have covered the abandoned house in the fort and the cemetery in the parking lot, but do you guys know of any other relics or structures left over on the property from the time before Kings Island? When Taft Broadcasting acquired all the land, did they ever envision a park bigger than what we have today, or did they want extra land solely for a natural barrier around it? Thanks. You guys are great. I listen to every episode while I'm driving my delivery truck. Well, thanks for listening, David.
When the Coney Island Group was looking to build Kings Island, and they met with Roy Disney, and the advice that he gave them was to buy twice as much land as you ever think you're going to need. And that's what they did. So there's plenty of room that if they wanted to expand, they could. They've sold, quite a bit of the property. They used to own both sides of the street. So the golf course, the tennis over there. They had the College Football Hall of Fame at one time on the corner of Kings Island Drive. So, basically both sides of the street was their property. So they sold a lot of that off. But still plenty of room to expand if they wanted to. But you don't want to get much bigger than what they are right now. It's 364 acres. That includes the parking lot. It's a pretty big sized park. You don't want to get too much bigger than what they already have. With that. But as far as the old relics and that, not really. I mean, there's some things if you're behind the scenes and you're going through some of the wooded areas back when dinosaurs alive and all that, you might come across something that looks like an old relic or something. But for the most part, no. I mean, it was just about everything else was cleaned out as they were building the park, and then they expanded to other areas because when it opened, there was an action zone, there wasn't Silk City, so as they built those things, some of the remaining things were cleaned out at that time.
What about the little schoolhouse looking building near the employee entrance on the south side of the property? That's got to be original.
That's been there forever, yes. Yes, it has.
Yeah. Somebody maybe on Reddit or something was asking about that, and it seems like it was a little disambiguous as to what it was originally, but later on it was like owned by a local church or something like that. But
yeah, I know one time there was a bunch of old park maps that were stored in there at one time. So yeah,
I've heard the Phantom for a time when they were bringing out Phantom Theater characters for Haunt, they stored them in there, or at least for some amount of time. Yeah. So that's pretty cool. All right, Steve from Lebanon, Ohio, he said, "You clowns seriously think Kings Island's becoming second rate? You've got a podcast with 12 listeners, and you're out here whining about because what? They ran out of ice? That's your grand indictment? Spare us the drama. Name a better park. Go ahead. Who tops the lineup of Diamondback, the Beast, Mystic, Orion, and Banshee? Nobody. You know what's second rate? Your hot takes." Does he mean just that segment second rate, but he likes the rest of the show? I don't know how offended I should be.
I don't know. We've talked about this too many times. You can have the best rides, but if the guest service isn't good, in terms of the attitude or the parks, the cleanliness just isn't there. Shops are closed. I mean, that all impacts everything. In terms of how the park would get rated. Just because it has the Beast, Diamondback, and Mystic Timbers doesn't make it first class. I mean, if somebody's just going to ride the coasters and not paying attention to anything else, that's great. You like that. But you said name another park, right? Is that what they said?
Yeah, name another park with a better lineup than the ones they listed.
Well, I mean, I think in terms of when we're talking about referring to Kings Island possibly becoming a second-rate park, I mean, better experiences can be found at a number of parks. Hershey Park is one. Epcot, the Disney parks, Universal, Holiday World, Dollywood, Silver Dollar City. Knoebels even has a great experience. For everybody to go, great food. Fun rides. Old school charm and that. So there's a lot of parks out there. that Kings Island used to be at the same level as, but they're not anymore. Let's just be honest; they're just not. And if you go to Hershey Park, I don't know anyone that's gone there that hasn't had a great time and been impressed with their lineup, been impressed with their food, been impressed with their special events. Uh, Dollywood, you know, fantastic park, great events, great food. Uh, Second to none when it comes to the hospitality. Holiday World right there with Dollywood. In terms of that hospitality. Uh, great roller coasters, great food. Great water park. I mean, just a lot of places out there. Silver Dollar City, they're right up there too. The guest experience is phenomenal there. So those are the kind of, when you talk about guest experience, that's, what Kings Island should be striving to get back to, is providing the experience that guests are getting at those other parks that I just mentioned.
Right, and also, it's funny because this is. I'm sure it wasn't the same person, but there's somebody that commented on, probably the season pass holder group. They identified themselves as like a longtime employee, and they said basically that it was this same episode he's referencing, like, oh, overflowing trash cans, that's been a problem for years, so you can't blame the management for that, which I don't quite understand the logic in that. But he said, if you guys have a complaint, then you should take it to the park instead of dragging the good name of the park through the mud, because it's still the best family friendly value. And it's like, well, first of all, if management knows that this is a problem and they haven't solved it, they either can't or won't. So the only way to affect change is to make it public, like we're doing it. So you're welcome. We're doing you a service. Secondly, the attitude coming in, this person is, to my understanding, not a full timer or a decision maker or stakeholder or anything like that. But if this is trickling down from management of like, oh, it's still a good deal or whatever, that is a guaranteed path of self destruction. We're talking about good enough is the attitude of Kings Island, and that's really paying dividends now, isn't it?
Well, Ryan, the way I would describe it is the standard isn't the standard anymore.
Well, they still have the standard. It just got a little bit lower, a little bit lower.
Yeah, exactly. What Greg Scheid said, when he posted on LinkedIn the things he was concerned about. I can promise you, if it's always been like that at Kings Island, I can tell you it wasn't like that during Greg Scheid's years. There might have been a time, when it's real busy, on a real busy day on a Saturday or something, and it's the trash cans are getting full at the Fest House or starting to, but Greg made sure that was getting taken care of, even if it was the full time people in there cleaning up.
That's what I was going to say. You better believe that if Greg Scheid saw a trash can overflowing like that, he was proactive to the point where you would see Tony Carvellano, the new park manager, and the brass on par with him would be out there changing trash bags because it was completely unacceptable. Unfortunately, now this person, as well as the employee that commented, think that this is acceptable. If that's the attitude trickling down, then they might be thinking, what else can we get away with?
I had many days where I was out in the park. I had the broom and the dustpan. I was cleaning tables in the Fest House. I was letting park services know if trash cans were getting full, and that was just me doing that. We had pretty much a full team of people that were doing that. So you're not seeing that today. In fact, during my visits this year, I rarely see anyone, with the gold tag out there walking around like we used to all the time.
Yeah, especially the ones that should be. Zach from Orlando said, "Hey guys, not sure how much you know about the racer's late sibling, Thunder Road at Carowinds, but do you know why this iconic attraction was torn down? If it truly was for the water park expansion, could they not have built pathways underneath it, similar to how King's Dominion's water park interacts with Racer 75? Do you think the same fate could ever come to the Racer or Racer 75? Thanks. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts."
I was at Carowinds interim PR. We were getting ready to open Jerry 325 when the decision was being made to remove Thunder Road, and remember sitting down with the general manager. He was getting my thoughts on how they should announce that. It was sad to see the ride go, but it had, over the years there, it had deteriorated. It wasn't in great shape. It needed a lot of work. Gravity Group wasn't doing their thing yet with the pre-cut track or anything to where they could have come in and really, made it almost like new, like the racer at Kings Island now. So the timing wasn't right because Gravity Group wasn't doing their thing, and just the amount of work that needed to be done. You had the new ride with Fury 325, the ridership because of how rough it had become, and it really I rode it in 2015, and the first part of the ride, I thought, okay, this isn't too bad. And then coming off the turnaround, it felt like square wheels, all the way back into the station. And I told the general manager, I said, yeah, I can see why, it's at that point where you have to move on from this, and it just needs too much work. So I think that's, they were upfront with, what needed to be done, and when they talked about ridership had declined, and I think they made the right call. At that time, you hate to see coasters go, but I think they made the right call. But had it, that not been in as bad a shape as it was, and the Gravity Group was doing what they're doing, I think we'd still see that ride.
There's a really good video on. I don't know who did it, but there's a really good video on um, the history of that particular ride, Thunder Road.
Yeah, yeah. It just had a lot of, it just deteriorated, and I don't know if it's because of, I know they had it had a paint job when it first opened, then they just let that all like chip away and stuff, and I don't know if that affected the wood, with the sun beating down on that. I don't know what it was, but it just didn't hold up, like Racer 75 at King's Dominion or the Racer at Kings Island, and the maintenance certainly, over the years on it, wasn't at the same level, I guess, as what they did at Kings. I mean, safety was still the prior. Don't get me wrong there, but I just think those extra steps where, uh, they did the work that was required every year. When the state would come out and inspect it, here's the work. Here's what you need to fix. They would do that, but Kings Island and Kings Dominion always went those extra steps beyond. With all their rides. So that's why you see the V still around today. That's why you see the Racer still around. It's because of all those extra steps that were taken care of long before the Gravity Group ever started doing what they do.
Yeah. And if you've got your own questions, feel free to send them to Don, not to me. Don Helbig at themeparksbydon.com. Your name, the city you're from, as well as your question. If you don't want to email him, you can always just hit us on Twitter, Tower_topics. Just send a private message and send your question with the same information. So before I forget, Don, so you're running a contest, shall we say? No purchase necessary, of course. Where you can win this sign. It's the Mystic Timbers announcement sign from the day that Mystic Timbers was announced. And in order to win the sign, well, you'll learn more, but you're going to have to follow Don on Twitter. Sorry, X. What am I thinking?
Yeah. Did you have a picture of that sign?
I do. I'll put it up in post. But so your X is at Don Helbig. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's at X. It's at Don Helbig, and what I'm going to do is I'll post a picture of it, the contest rules, and you simply just have to either you have to be following me, and then you have to do a repost, and then there'll be a random drawing, and somebody will win that sign. So if you're a fan of Mr. Timbers, it's a chance to own a piece of the ride's history, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
But yeah, this was 2016. It was outside. The announcement was behind the Crypt building.
Right.
So it was like right outside there, and it said what time the announcement was and that. But going through some of my things and just I thought I think fans of Tower Topics would maybe enjoy having this if I was going to move on from it. So again, no purchase will be necessary. It'll be just a matter of, hey, follow me on X and repost, and you'll get a chance to win that.
Yeah, Don, tell me about the t-shirts.
Tower Topics t-shirts, they come in a wicked green color, any size that you want, and we have done many sizes. We've had the youth extra small was one to 3 or 4 or 5X type shirts. But if you're interested in one, they're $22. That includes the shipping, and you can send an email to me at donhelbig@themeparksbydon.com and just put TT shirt in the subject line. I'll send you the QR code, and you can make your purchase. It'll just take a few days after that to get your shirt. But we also have more. We have stickers. Those have become a pretty popular item since we've introduced those. They're like vinyl stickers. perfect for like your cars, tumblers, water bottles, any kind of hard surface that you'd want to put these on. It's going to be great. Come in a couple of different sizes. The price is going to include the shipping. So for $5, we got 4.5 inch by 3 inch. These are the ones that you'd want to put on the tumblers, the mugs, those kind of things, water bottles. And then 6.5 inch by 4 inch, those are $7. And these are great for your car windows. Same address, Don Helbig at themeparksbydon.com if you're interested in the stickers, or you can just message us on our X, which is tower_topics, and we will get that QR code to you, and we'll get those stickers out to you quickly. I didn't think the sticker. I mean, I knew that there'd be some interest in it, but I wasn't. I was surprised, Ryan, to be honest, about the demand that we've had for those stickers.
Yeah, it's funny because when we first promote, we thought that we would drop them and like they would, because like I feel like when we come up with a new color of a T-shirt, we sell a ton and then it kind of evens out. But we thought that we dropped the stickers because you did in the Tower Topics group, right? And it's like, a
Right.
couple people showed interest, and then as soon as we start talking about it on the show, now it's like they're going out like crazy. So
Yeah.
appreciate
And you
you taking
started,
care of that.
saw a couple of them, being used in car windows.
Mm-hmm.
On my last visit to Kings Island, we're seeing the Tower Topic shirts. People wearing them everywhere. We had one. If you go to our X, you'll see a picture of someone strong shirt game at
Yeah,
Epcot with the Tower Topic shirts. So we appreciate the support.
we do. Well, shout out to Frankenberry for our new outro song. But I'm Ryan Sir along with Don Helbig, and this is Tower Topics.